students, and also be a legendary example if you ever teach macro to your students next time. The legendary classic example was given in the slide. The student wrote money demand function, NP over P, okay, H0 plus H1Y minus H2I. Okay, the legendary answer was, the student said H2 goes up, money demand goes down. Why? Because of minus sign. This is atrocious, you know. Alright? If you are still doing this, it's because everything to you is equation. The equation says so much. The equation says this one got minus sign, this one go up, this one go down. But this is atrocious. Alright? Okay? So I meant to embarrass you. I meant to make you feel guilty. So that you don't do it in the exam. It's better that I scold you and embarrass you now than you show to UK examiner and he laugh off his head. This is wrong, you know. Look at your slide. What are the variables in the economy? The variables is income and interest rate there. H1 and H2 is your response. You're responding to interest rate. You're not responding to money demand with H2, you know. It's wrong. Okay? So please don't make this kind of mistake. You know, this tells me you are overly dependent on equation already. Everything is equation says wrong. Okay? But look at this equation. This is Keynes function, and some of you forgot. This function is split into two. This portion here tells you this is holding money, okay, for transaction motive. It means you want to buy goods and services. H0, H1Y. You hold money for transaction motive. H0, right, is the minimum you will hold. Whether you put money in the bank or not, it doesn't matter. You still need to spend. And how much more you spend depends on H1Y. So that's why it depends on P and Y. Okay? This portion here, H1Y, on its own is also for precautionary motive, for emergency. If you are rich enough, you will hold a fraction for rainy days. That's transaction, that's precautionary motive. Okay, right? So stop studying money demand as an equation. Keynes says you hold money for three purposes: TM, PM, and the final part here is transaction for speculative motive. You want to grow your wealth. You want to decide whether to buy or sell bonds. Alright? Okay? Now, this mistake is something that I think you've got to face it. Not everyone can understand money demand. Everybody keeps treating money demand as growing rich, growing poor. It's not. It's about holding it. Spend a bit more time on this equation. Don't underestimate it. Alright? So in this case, when you say H2 goes up, it tells you, look at your slides, I can toggle the screen. It simply means you don't hold more money, you know. It's just that you are very sensitive to interest rates. You're all ready to buy and sell bonds. So if H2 goes up, okay, that tells you increase in interest rate will be smaller. Alright, for household to buy bonds. Interest rate goes up, you buy bonds. If you are very sensitive to interest rate, you just give me a smaller interest rate and therefore money demand drops. So money demand drops not because of H2 leh. Money demand drops because of interest rate, not H2. So look at the variables. If you are clear what it means by holding money for TM, PM, SM, you know the variable is Y and I, not H1, H2. Alright, so get it sorted out, okay? Feel embarrassed, it's okay to feel embarrassed now. Okay, right? Better than you flag all these mistakes on the exam. So this is Keynes money demand function. Okay, and of course there is Baumol-Tobin. Okay, I'll write it at the bottom now. You can put it into your slide, equation. Derivation, not required. Most of you are not doing this topic for section B. This is only for section A. So Y times TC over 2I. So this is Baumol's model. So you split into two. Baumol says You use this equation because we are looking at, right, money in the bank. Right, you're looking at putting money in the bank. So that will affect your money demand. So the examiner's favorite question is always about online banking. They always like to talk about ATM, right? So in this case, if you have online banking, ATM, transaction cost is near zero. You don't need to travel to the bank, right? Anytime you can do transaction, and therefore money demand is near zero. I realize a lot of students don't dare to write those things. They're like, means I'm poor. No, you're not poor. Just that your money is not in your hands. Your money is in the bank. That's why when we say money demand is zero, you keep thinking, wow, I become poor. That's the concept that you actually mistaken. Money demand is not your wealth. It's part of it. It's just where you hold it. So you don't hold any money. You put all the money in the bank. Right? So that is Baumol's model. Then under Tobin, focus is money is in financial assets. Instead of putting money in the bank, you put money as financial assets. Then you're thinking whether you need to sell them away, right? Therefore, you need to sell FA to convert to money. This is Tobin's model. Okay, same thing, they like to ask brokerage fees, which is actually transaction cost. Right? So if transaction costs were to go up, it's very costly, okay, to actually sell your FA. Right? So therefore, money demand will go up. It means you want to hold more as money. If it's very costly to sell away FA, you won't hold a lot of FA, right? You hold a lot of money. So both the Baumol's model is easier because we all can relate to it. Tobin is a little bit tricky. They like to test brokerage fees. You have to think of it. You are already holding FA. If transaction cost goes up, you will sell away so that you don't have to keep selling. Then you hold a lot of liquidity, money demand goes up. Okay, now, besides this, I discussed this in review in the tutorial. This discussion must assume, okay, financial institutions, including banks, are safe. Alright, you must trust the banks to put money in the bank. You must trust FI to buy financial assets. So the assumption of the model is FI are safe. But the popular exam question is, what if there is risk? Alright, okay, so here, I'll put a note for you. Examiner like to ask, is risk increase? But if you actually look at the model don't have this, right? The model only has Y, TC, and 2I. Or should I say, interest rate. So if you want to discuss risk, then you may want to say financial institution will increase interest rate, right? Okay, because we choose to hold money in our hands because FI are not safe. So if financial institution risk goes up, financial institution will offer better interest rate. But we must assume that the interest rate they offer us can exceed the risk. Then money demand will go down. It means household will put money in the banks, okay, or financial assets. So nowadays, Baumol Tobin's questions are not so straightforward. No longer ask transaction costs. They will talk about risk in FI. So when you read the question, you might think that hey, it's a new topic. Actually, it's not. It's actually money demand, talking about holding money in the banks or putting money as financial assets. So the higher risk, the FI will compensate with higher interest rate. Okay, right? And again, you can put this with see the world. Right? For example, if the risk level in Thailand is very high, or the risk level in Russia is very high, they give you high interest rate, you also don't want to put any money as FI in the banks of Russia or Ukraine or even Thailand, Indonesia, right? You hold the money. Okay? Again, you can put see the world. Alright, so risk, you can talk about any economies that are collapsing. Euro, right? Like for example, in Europe, for example, Greece. Right? High interest rate in Greece, people still want to hold money because they don't trust the banks anymore. Okay, right? So this is on money demand perspective. So make sure you study Keynes money demand as well as Paulo Coelho. Okay, don't forget about this topic, but don't go and waste time on derivation. Okay, because you are not studying this for section B. You're doing it primarily for section A. So they tend to be a question on money demand. Next slide, money supply. Let's do this bit, then we'll go for a break. So money supply. The first thing they like to test is the money multiplier. Even in my slides, don't go and waste time on derivation. It's good to memorize this equation. Just like any equation can actually destroy you if you do not know how to use it. Okay? The famous example analysis examiner likes to test is RD. Okay? And usually they like to say RD from. So again, showing you the classic mistake students like this. Students again quote the equation and say RD drops and increase. They got nothing else to say already. I think I mentioned ever to you in this class. 2 years ago, I have this student. Okay? 2 years ago, exam paper must do 8 out of 10 short questions. After the exam, she texts me and she said, I finished the paper. I can even do all the 10 questions in section A. Right? Then of course she failed lah. You know why? Because all her answers were like that lost. That's why she had time to do 10 questions instead of 8. She finished the whole paper. And she can even tell me when she did her prelims for section A, she only used 2 sheets of paper, 2 pages to do section A for all 8 questions. Because she got nothing to say, all her answers were like that one. Alright, so you must be careful. Okay, you can do doesn't mean you can pass. You must meet examiner's requirement. That is economic behavior. There is no economic behavior, there's only equation. So what is the behavior? The banking process. Okay? Now, just to draw the flow diagram I did in lecture notes with you. Okay, you can put this in. But remember, this is not counted in the exam. You draw this in, you will have a big question mark for you. Okay, what is banking process? Banking process, first of all, we must know money supply in general is currency plus deposits. Okay, the C here is not consumption already. So money comes into our hands. Household will decide how much to hold as currency, how much to put in the banks as deposits. Okay, you can give yourself a numerical example, $10,000. And banks receive deposits, he will look at the R%. Okay, example, initially 10%, and that was your reserves. Okay, and the balance is called excess reserves. You have to describe the process. If you have not studied this, you didn't know this is important, please go and study this. Write out in words, this is not counted. Okay, so this excess reserves, what will happen? It will go into loans. Right? The banks wants to make money, he will take the excess reserves, issue as loans. But the loans are in checks, and that's why they must deposit back to the bank. New deposits are created. And therefore, D increase, money supply increase. This is what I meant by money creation process. You need to discuss in words. Okay? You can put in numerical figure if you want to, but it's actually not crucial because you don't have a calculator. So answer the question, right? If R drops, okay, to say 5%, don't need to calculate. Just tell the examiner with the same $10,000 deposits, reserves in the bank will drop. The bank will have more excess reserves, more loans created, new deposits are bigger, money supply increases, larger, right? And therefore, multiplier increase. Look at this answer versus the top answer. Equations merely guide you to the answer. This is the economics behavior. What is this behavior? Bank's behavior. What he did with our money. Right? And how money can grow faster. Remember, money is always growing. So you cannot say money supply increase. Actually, money supply increase is larger. That's a bigger multiplier. But look at this entire scenario. What was the assumption you made? You assume banks are willing to lend out. You assume there are borrowers. That's one. But what was the biggest assumption? The biggest assumption was D was constant. Right? So make sure you include it in your assumption. Okay? But what is a good C and S? Challenge assumption and see the world, which is given in my slide. Alright? Pay a lot of attention when we say RD drops. Alright? It means you increase the risk of banks. The banks can collapse very fast because the banks don't hold enough money. So refer to my slides. Okay, a good exam answer should highlight that if RD drops, don't have to copy, okay, the risk of banks goes up. So household, right, household, or we call it public, there will be what we call a fear of run on the bank. Means they are afraid, right? Everyone will rush to the bank to take out money. And remember, a run on the bank is contagious. Right? You are afraid you will also do it. As a result, your deposits will drop. It's no longer 10,000. So if you take the numerical discussion, it means C over D goes up because numerator go up, denominator went down. Okay? Then you don't need to go and recalculate. You just say, therefore, M may not increase. That's all. Answer the question. Okay? Alright? Then, in this case, you can put in an example. Right? Indonesia in the 97 Asian financial crisis. Money may not grow. It's hard to put in see the world if you actually don't make enough articles, but at least to see the world is here already. You don't treat this topic as CD and RD. You are aware what is the role of RD, which I discussed in my lecture notes. Right? It's not about money grow or not. It's about bank security. So when we discuss the topic on money market, when we talk about banks, financial institutions, their stability matters. Not interest rate goes up, we buy bonds. It's not. Right? So as you move to the last stage of preparing exam, you've got to leave out your answer to show that you're thinking, you are aligning yourself to the real world. Not staying in a fictitious world. This one go down, that one go up.
So we need to wear.
See how much gap you need to close between now and 3 weeks time. And this is possible. By now you know how to challenge your assumption already. Then now just tell yourself, when you look at FI, think about the word risk. Instability. It will turn the whole story around. Challenge assumption doesn't need fantastic long paragraph of answer. Challenge assumption is always one liner. You just use the word however. You will make it sit up and say, oh yeah, you take a point. Alright, so remember your target is to do best 4 questions with substitution. Hopefully these questions come out and we can really display how competent we are. These topics can do debates. The later topics on APAS very difficult because it's very technical. So that's why the earlier topics is easy to study. The more you must polish your answer, read real world data, you have an understanding how you can align them. Alright? So don't say topic is easy, exam question is easy. Yes, exam question can be predictable, but the more you want to impress. Okay, so we go for a break. Let's come back at 1:45.